States usually talk about similar things most of the time. They say, "We work for you." They use pleasant-sounding words such as economic stability, growth, prosperity, and equal opportunity. And people by nature think, so this system exists for our development. But if you look at history a little more closely and a little more objectively, you realize that there's a completely different reality behind this. The fact is that there are certain financial strategies that states have continued to use for centuries. These strategies are usually not stated openly or explained directly, because if they were explained directly, they would provoke public reaction. That is why states use a more complex, softer, more official language. Yet the result is mostly the same. The purchasing power of ordinary people declines. Their savings melt away while power and wealth accumulate upward. And when you look at it, the most striking thing is this. Almost none of these strategies are new. The names change, those who implement them change, the era changes. But the system always remains the same. Let us start with the simplest and oldest known method, inflation. If a state has a budget deficit, meaning it earns less revenue than it spends, it has two options to deal with this situation. The first option is to openly raise taxes and say, "We need more money." But this is uncomfortable for voters. It causes public backlash and leads to loss of votes. The second option is carried out much more quietly, reducing the value of money. One of the clearest examples of this in history is ancient Rome. As the Roman Empire expanded its borders, its army grew, wars increased, and expenses multiplied. The emperors found the solution in reducing the amount of silver in the currency. At first, the denarius was almost entirely pure silver, but over time it turned into copper with only a thin layer of silver applied on top. On paper, everything looked the same name, the same value. But in reality, the money in people's pockets was worth less. What was the result? Prices rose, savings melted away. Wages could not keep up. No one was told, "We increased taxes," but everyone paid the price. It was a silent and hidden tax. A similar situation is happening today. Those who change money are no longer just emperors, but central banks and monetary policies. Looking at the Middle Ages, the method was different, but the mindset remained the same. This time, forced loans came into play. In England, France, and Spain, kings would knock on the doors of wealthy merchants and guilds and tell them, "You will lend money to the state." This was not an offer, it was an order. Refusing it would have severe consequences. Sometimes these loans were repaid, sometimes repaid late, sometimes repaid in devalued currency. Often, they were never repaid at all. But this was called a patriotic duty. The state survived, fought its wars, and protected its palaces. The victims of this process were private individuals. In the 17th century, things became even more institutionalized. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded. The official narrative was this: modern finance, stability, trust. But the real reason was simple. The state needed money to fight France. The wealthy lent money to the state and received regular interest in return. This time there was no risk because the guarantee of these interest payments was taxes. And who paid those taxes? The people. From salt to beer, from cloth to everyday goods, taxes were collected on everything to pay the interest. In other words, ordinary people financed the secure income of the wealthy. This method was so successful that it is still used today. Lending money to the state is considered the safest investment in the world. But that safety exists thanks to the labor of the people. When we come to the present day, this scenario is very familiar. States take on huge debts. They say, we are building roads, we are creating jobs, we are spending for the people. But a large portion of the money is spent on the defense industry, large corporations, and bailout operations during crises. When the time comes to repay the debts, the belts are tightened, not at the top, but at the bottom. Taxes increase, social rights are reduced, or the value of money declines. The debt is presented as if it were taken for the people, but the gains once again flow to a certain segment. Let us remember the 2008 crisis. Due to the risks taken by banks, the system was on the verge of collapse. States intervened using taxpayers' money and rescued the banks. What happened afterward? The same banks grew even larger. The profits were private. The losses were once again reflected onto society. Pension systems are also built on a similar structure. People pay contributions for years and assume that this money is accumulating somewhere. But in reality, in most countries, this money is spent immediately. There is no real accumulation, only a promise. As the population ages, the system comes under strain. Once again, the solution is imposed on the public. Later retirement, lower pensions, lower purchasing power. In all these examples, one thing remains the same: perception management. Inflation is called growth. Debt is called investment, and cuts are called reforms. The words are softened, but the consequences are very harsh. In recent years, this has become even more complex. Terms like quantitative easing have emerged. Central banks have printed trillions of money. The system stayed afloat. Who benefited from this? Those who own assets, those with stocks, houses, and bonds. The majority whose lives became more expensive and more difficult did not. There are also hidden taxes. If your salary increases but your purchasing power decreases, you are actually losing. Inflation is useful for states because it erodes debt. But for citizens, it is a silent loss. Regulations are often not innocent either. On paper, they protect the public, but in reality, they work in favor of large corporations. The small are eliminated, the large grow stronger. Even wars function in a similar financial way. They're called temporary. Debts are taken on, but the repayment of those debts lasts for generations. And perhaps the strongest trick of all is making things appear complicated. Budgets, tax systems, financial terms that no one understands. You cannot oppose what you do not understand. Why is this still important today? Because this order continues in the same way. Inflation erodes savings. Debts keep growing. Bailouts always go to similar places. There may be differences in method between what happened in Rome in the past and what is happening today, but there is no difference in logic. The bitter truth is this: most people are not even aware of this, and perhaps that is the system's greatest advantage. That is why financial literacy is important. Knowing history enlightens a person. Look at the background of events. Ask, who is winning? Do not assume the system works for you. History hides the answers, but only those who know how to look can see them. By following our channel, you can become one of those who know how to look.